Hello.
Hello.
Welcome back.
We're live.
We're live back in the Vibe Lounge.
We are. I've missed the Vibe Lounge.
Listen, you live here.
I
I've
know.
missed the Vibe Lounge more, I think, than you might have.
Been out here though because it's been so cold. So the Vibe Lounge is my garage.
The garage.
Yes, the garage. And it is while it is insulated, when it gets brutal, it takes a lot to get up to a comfortable temperature. So
And it's been
it has
brutal
been
up here.
brutal.
Yeah, it's brutal today. It's whippy.
Yeah. So it's actually sat out here really sadly unused for a
Still
while.
waiting for us.
It's like just like us humans, it's like the warmer weather is coming. I will be loved again.
I will be loved
I will be
again.
used.
Anyways, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Bad Pancake.
Welcome back. We have missed
podcast.
you. Honestly, we have.
We have missed you. It's been a journey. In real time, it's been about a month and a half that we've actually recorded.
Yeah.
By the time the gap in between that people will be listening or that this episode will be available for listening
Mhm.
is like 6 or 7 weeks. But
That was not our intention.
that was not our intention. In fact, I do remember lecturing Rachel when we first said we were going to do a podcast. I said, we have to be consistent.
Yep.
We have to set up a cadence. What is the cadence going to be? And she said, weekly. And I said, all right. And then we've been really busy.
It hasn't been because we haven't wanted to.
Yes. And that we haven't tried.
Yes. You're going to expose us. Okay.
This is the expose moment. We recorded a 2-hour podcast, over 2 hours.
It was over 2 hours. It was. So let's just equate what that means in data wise. Like we're talking a total of probably 40 gig worth of video, audio. We recorded a lot of stuff.
We recorded a lot of stuff, and it almost was to the point where thinking about like post podcast recording and the editing part of what we have to do, I was like, this might become 2 podcasts. It didn't, because technology. We're new to this and we're figuring out the system, and hopefully today we have it somewhat better figured out than what we have in the past, but it just didn't work. And there was finally a moment where both of us tried our best. We both took turns giving it our all and
We did.
trying to figure out how the hell to make it happen and how to put it out. And we even got to a point where we're like, we're just going to share the audio portion of this.
Yep.
And then we were like, wait a second. We feel like the universe is trying to tell us that it doesn't need to be what we originally set out
Right.
for it to be, and that maybe this was a conversation that we just needed to have that can be kind of kept close to our chest. However, in Jill's pipe dreamland, one day we're going to recover those files and we're going to share the lost podcast.
That would be
episode.
fun. We still have the files.
Yeah, we still have them.
It just became very daunting to figure out how to get them to a usable place. But yeah.
Yeah, to even upload them into a computer was
Yeah.
taking 6, 8, 10 hours. And we said, fuck it.
Yeah, pretty much. And I did. I thought that, after a while, I'm really leaning into the idea of watching for signs from the universe to tell us kind of what that next step is, because it's leading us really thoughtfully and appropriately right now as I'm feeling it. And so when we recorded, it was an interesting conversation. Like I really appreciated having that conversation. There were some subjects touched on and such that we will revisit. But for whatever reason, it was the first thing in all of this that we've been trying to do that got really hard and wouldn't work. And I kept trying to force it. You kept trying to force it. And we're like banging our heads against the wall. And I think it just it all of a sudden dawned on me. And I think it was rolling around in your head too. Like maybe this is just not the right time for that conversation to be introduced or whatever it is. And so, that's one of the things that I love about our partnership and our relationship, that we both believe in that kind of stuff. And so if it's not working right now, there's a reason for that.
Yeah,
and so it's okay to say, you know what? Let's put a pin in that one for right now.
And how do you explain that to somebody who doesn't believe in the push and pull of the universe? You can't.
No, you cannot.
That would have been the end of HDC probably. We tried. But the fact that we do both kind of live in the rhythm of what's in front of us. And I will say, just to touch back on what you said about the universe has been giving us not just these like thoughtful and interesting signs, but they have been delightful interactions. Like I shit y'all not. Rachel and I will meet up for coffee to go over something, and we have these angels walking to the space who are meant to be there, who are planted intentionally, and we talk with them for a little bit, we tell them what they're doing, and their eyes light up, and they're doing something similar, or they're desperate for that kind of information and connection. Nobody can tell me that the universe isn't working on purpose especially after the past month.
I know.
You will never have enough evidence in the world to convince me otherwise
Yeah.
that there's intent and purpose. And,
Just
like, that's it.
Just yesterday, sitting
Yeah.
in Grayling Restaurant, having breakfast, talking about our summit
Mhm.
over the weekend and such, and this gentleman walks by our table and stops and just says, like, "I wasn't trying to eavesdrop or anything," and I was thinking, "It's a small place and we're loud people anyway, so it's not really hard to hear what we're talking about."
That's true.
But we were talking about the women that we had the privilege of working with over the weekend and kind of, just taking a beat to talk about what worked really well and areas that we wanted to grow and develop. And this gentleman, he felt it was necessary to stop and just say and recognize, it sounds like you are both really working hard to develop humans and to lean into
No,
humans and build
let's
humans.
clarify what this gentleman angel man said to us, said to you. He said, "I have" he looked at me and he said, in lesser term or more terms than, "You're not important right now." He turned to Rachel and he said, "You are a builder of people, and I can hear it." And I just got the privilege to sit there and watch this magical connection happen, and I was like, "Hell yeah, she needed to hear that. She's working so hard right now." Like, I could see your like, the wheels were turning, and you're wanting to improve, and you're wanting to finesse, but, like, the universe was like, "Hey, stop, take a beat, and, like, give yourself the, like, glow of what has been accomplished, because maybe you haven't done it yet,
Yeah.
like, until that point." I certainly did. I cried driving home. I was like, "Hell yeah. Feeling my feels. Look what we just did. We fucking did it because we did it." And I
You did.
think he was put there for you to have some validation.
Thank you for remembering exactly what he said because
Did
I
you black
forgot.
out?
Yeah, like, I totally did. Like, as soon as you started saying that, I'm like, "Oh, that is how it happened."
He was not there to talk to me.
He was. Like, don't undersell yourself in any way, shape, or form, but there is some evidence that's really kind of just being thrown right at our faces that
Yeah.
there's some really special stuff happening, and, we're both instinctual people, and I think that we both, as we just established, like, there are signs out there that can help us understand where we're meant to be in any given moment, as long as you're paying attention to them, because there are signs everywhere that is telling you, yes, green flag over here, or no,
He
red
stopped.
flag here.
Yeah.
And so when you can train yourself almost to start to see those and recognize that they don't always necessarily make sense or fit, the puzzle piece doesn't necessarily
Mhm.
fit into the big picture yet, it eventually will if you can trust. And that's where faith kind of comes in and all of that about this whole project and just life in general, and kind of where I've resigned myself to the fact that, okay, I'm going to stop trying to force that square peg into a round hole. And I'm
Mm.
just going to let these little angels that show up on any given day that just, who knows, I will maybe never see that guy. I've never seen that
I've never
gentleman
seen that
before
guy
in
in
my
my life,
life. Yep.
and I have a feeling we never will.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he had a very distinct voice, and I know I'll be able to hear that voice a
Yeah.
mile away, but I don't think that we ever will. I think he was intentionally planted. All this to say, we did have episode 2 ready, lined up.
Yeah.
We wanted to talk about burnout
Yep.
because I think both of us were on the precipice of it. It ended up turning into a big conversation about grief. In both topics, we really want to approach thoughtfully and have met and gotten to know really wonderful people who can speak to that in either a really professional sense or also in a really like lived experience way. And so we're now realizing like we want to rework the conversation a
Yeah.
little bit to include more people in that. So that's a note to our listeners. Stay tuned and see, who we bring to the table and what they have to say. And another thing for us that through the process of trying to make episode 2 happen, we've also kind of refurbished how we want our episodes to run.
Yep.
So right now is our check-in part. Eventually, we'll move into our bigger conversation, our topic of the day, but the first part of our podcast will mostly be used to check in and see how things are going with the Human Development Collective, what we've been working on, what's fresh, what we're looking forward to, any shit that hit the fan.
Yeah.
This will be a
All of it.
space to share about that because we are still 2 humans who are building a company,
We sure are.
or 2 women who are building a company, and,
Busy women too that are trying to fit this
women.
in.
Yeah. You wanna talk about like, I do think it's laughable. We are recording this podcast on one of the busiest days that I inadvertently have.
Yeah.
I had a chiropractor's appointment this morning, and then my boyfriend needed his stadium chair from the truck, so I had to drop that off, and then we're recording the podcast, and my mom's asking me what I wanna do for my 40th birthday. I don't fucking know. And then after this, I have a work call, and then I have a hair appointment, and then I have to teach musical theater, and then my son has a band concert, and then I have to get ready for a presentation tomorrow.
All today.
All today.
That's a lot.
I know.
Deep breath. Whew.
So we're recording on my lunch break, Laura and Lee. That's my team.
But you know what is lovely is that I actually feel like these are low stress conversations. Like even though
Mhm,
we have to carve out the time to have them and stuff, I always enjoy the thought and
mhm.
the conversation that comes out of it. So I hope
Same,
you
same.
find some release of some of that stress as we chat.
Well,
But it helps keep us focused too, because we have
it
just a
does. Like,
limited
I've
of
got
time.
yeah, we can't get off the by and
Yeah.
by, and also we got a really wonderful, motivating, and, threatening text message from our friend Mary Herman, with gratitude. Like, that was a wonderful little, like, yet another sign from the
It
universe. Like,
really was. Thank you,
people
Mary.
do care about what we're doing and want to see us doing it and doing it well, and, like, that was just another, like, little hug from the universe to be like, "Okay, move forward, like, keep going, don't stop yet," and for Mary to take a minute to not just think about us, but to send us a collective message with a title that says what was it? Podcast
I think
accountability.
yeah, I didn't read the entire thing, but I think she created
She
a
created a
text
group
chain
text.
for us, the 3 of us, Mary and you and I, and it's podcast accountability, which I love because we just had a conversation this
Was
weekend
the
about
best.
the importance of accountability,
Yeah,
and
and
maybe she picked up on the fact that we needed a little,
she's
perhaps?
so good at that
Yeah,
though too, in, like, the most loving and caring ways,
yeah.
like, the little nudges. So thanks, Mary,
Thank you,
appreciate you.
Mary. Well, and it was really cool because, like, when Jill walked in today, I was like, "It's crazy to think that people are thinking about that and such," to think that
Mhm.
because we talked about it on Saturday that, "Hey, folks, we're gonna record again on Wednesday," and to have that message pop up on Wednesday morning first thing, it's like,
Yeah,
it made me feel like, "Thank you, Mary." So, yes, thank you, Mary.
very grateful for that. Anyways, today we're
Today.
gonna have a really interesting conversation, I think.
Yeah.
This has been something that's been on my mind. I am curious and wanted Rachel and I to sit down together and talk about our relationships with alcohol.
Mhm.
Partially because I just finished my first dry January of my life in my adult consuming. You know what I
Sure.
mean? You guys know what I mean. Which was something that a couple years ago I never thought to even do, and at the same time, didn't think that I had the capability to do. So, thinking about that in my own life and knowing a little bit about Rachel's journey, it made me curious to see what the outcome would be like, if we have this conversation together, because I'm sure you have some nuggets of wisdom. I probably have maybe some nuggets too, but we have a little bit of a different story.
Yeah.
And so I think it's great for us to sit down and chat about it.
Yeah. Uh, I'm glad that you, asked if we could talk about this because um it's probably the single most profound thing that's happened in my life, and it's been transformational, and it's weird because it's not hard to talk about, but I try not to share unless I'm asked about it, if that makes sense, because I
Mhm.
sometimes I find that when I talk about sobriety and such, that if there are people who are even in their own head worried about their own behavior or perhaps identifying with some of the negative behaviors, it can prompt them to feel defensive, and I don't
Mhm.
wanna ever make anybody feel like that, and so
Mhm.
I am happy to share anything about my experience. I'm fascinated to hear about how your dry January went and your first in your adult drinking life, and, because 'cause we've had a ton going on, like, that's
Yeah.
what's fascinating is, you chose to go through, a very busy January and
Yeah, probably the
without partaking.
busiest chosen January of my life, like, meaning that I was doing things that were intentionally stressful, like, I took that on for myself and chose to do dry January, which I never would have in previous Januaries. They were challenging in different ways. So, like, it was a really interesting experience. To get us really started into the nitty-gritty, I'm curious, what was your exposure to alcohol in
Mhm.
your youth as, baby Rachel, young Rachel, growing up? Like, was alcohol around? Was that in your life? Were adults partaking? What'd that look like for you?
Yeah, alcohol was always a part of my life. My parents were young when they had me. My mom was 19, and so they were still kind of fresh kids too, and so, it wasn't uncommon. I remember as a kid, like, waking up in the middle of the night and coming down, and my mom had friends over, and they were playing cards, and there was drinking, and it never felt threatening or anything. It
Mhm,
was fun, but
mhm,
there was alcohol always around. And so it was very normal to me, like every holiday function, every birthday party, every reason to get together, there was a cooler of beer or there was this or there was
mhm,
that. And so it was very normal to me, but I was never a drinker.
mhm,
And so I watched like my family and everybody partake. I did witness and observe some people who had struggles with it. My former stepfather, he was an alcoholic, and we saw the kind of the output of what that disease did to the family, and it just, it actually caused me to just never really be curious about drinking. But it definitely was always around. It was always the thing, I think, that I was trained that without alcohol there isn't fun. And
hmm,
so if we want an event to be fun, we need to lubricate it with alcohol.
mhm,
And so I think I learned that messaging and kind of just replicated that throughout, certain experiences. And because I wasn't a drinker, um, it almost I it almost caused me to feel like on the outside. I don't know how to explain that, quite honestly. It was something that I saw the people around me doing. It was something that I saw seemed fun. There was a lot of, my mom would socialize at the bar a lot. And so it was just always very, very normal to me.
mhm,
And then I didn't start to really see the ugly side of drinking until my stepdad really, and seeing how that impacted my mom and everything.
mhm. And how old would you have been at that point in time?
I believe that I would have been 6 or 7, I think, when my mom and Jim got together. It was tough because when I went to elementary school, I went to a different elementary school than my brother did, and so I had to take a bus. We lived in Flint at the time, and so it was a long bus ride. It was, like, quite a far way away. Well, my bus happened to pass by where my stepdad worked and
Mhm.
also the bar where my stepdad would frequent.
Gotcha.
And so every day at that point, it got to be I would be asked by my mom when I got off the bus, "Was Jim at work or was Jim at the bar?" And so it started to become like I started to see things and I
Mhm,
started to be a part of that in an uncomfortable way because if I said what I saw, then
mhm.
it was exposed, obviously, because she would confront him.
Right.
And then it would become very obvious that I was "ratting on him," quote, unquote, and
Yeah.
so
Inadvertently, it sounds like you got triangulated.
yeah,
That sucks.
it was tough,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, they ended up divorcing. Jim is my brother's dad, and, like, no ill will, like, he
Mhm,
has gone through his own journey, but it definitely started to teach me, um, the grip that alcohol can have on people, on families, and just on reality.
I grew up in a house that didn't really have much.
Really?
Or at least I was so wrapped up in my own baby Jill life and, like, had the luxury of being able to be self-centered, that I didn't see it in my house. This is a funny story that my family loves to tell, is that when I was about 5 or 6, I think, we bought a new house that was built on a cul-de-sac, and so when the neighborhood first moved in, one of the houses threw a house party. Well, I guess they were playing a game where you would count the bubbles that would come up in the bottle, right? And my dad won.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Go
and
dad.
spent the night in the bathroom
Yeah.
just feeling miserable, I'm sure. And as 5-year-old Jill, 6-year-old Jill, she was really worried about dad. And I guess I marched my tiny little tush down to the house party house, banged on their door, and my hands on my hips and my sassiest voice, and I said, "What did you do to my daddy?" Right? And that's, like, the only memory that I really even have of my parents engaging in alcohol. Like, I don't even remember seeing them at, like, a family event with a drink in their hand. We never had a separate cooler. I never thought about, like, "Oh, should I drink this? Should I not drink this?" When I was in high school, it came around a little bit more, but really not in a way that was, like, perceptible, I guess, to me. Like, I grew up dancing, so I'm sure that when we would go to our competitions or we would take our family vacations to these national competitions. So we'd be in Ocean City, we'd be in Las Vegas, and the adults around us, of course, were drinking, but it was never in a way that impacted what I had to get done and,
Right.
like, what I was doing. So it was very easy for me to just not see it. Am I a dense person in real life? Yes. That's where it started, so I'm sure that there were
It
people around me.
tracks.
Yeah, like, it tracks, that makes sense because sometimes can't see the forest for the trees, so that's okay. I think the interesting part about the presence of alcohol is that it had, like, it was like a silent thing in the background. I don't know much about my biological father and my parents' relationship before I came along. But from what I understand, there was some alcohol abuse there, significant enough and potentially other stuff, and that's why my parents split up. That kind of, like, lurked in the background. The premise that set up for me was that I am genetically predisposed to addiction, and that has been a birdie on my shoulder my whole life. I've never done hard drugs because I'm worried that that slippery slope into addiction is powerful for me. It took me a long time to be comfortable with gambling because that slippery slope into addiction. There are folks in my family, and I am a person who, alcohol has been an addiction that I've actively engaged in my life. So, but like, that's what it was like in my youth, that it just kind of like, it wasn't in front of me, but it might have been behind me.
I know when I really started to reconcile, and I don't wanna jump too far ahead, but when I started to reconcile my own behavior, I had family who obviously cared about me and concerned about me and, shared with me that there was alcoholism that ran in my family through, like, my grandmother's side of the
Mhm.
family, so, like, even going back generations and such. But it's interesting, the concept and the idea of addiction is um, I don't know if I believe in the idea of physical addiction to alcohol.
Mhm.
And
Say more.
I think that addiction in and of itself is wounded people
Mhm.
use to numb themselves. And that thing is just whatever they can access and whatever they were able to fit
Mhm.
into their life as socially or socially acceptable in the beginning, and then they were
Mhm.
able to manipulate that and use that in the way that they numb, in the way that they use that to treat their own ailments or whatnot. But, it's like, I remember after I was sober, probably a couple of years, I went to a birthday party and my son was there, Alex, and there were drinks all around and stuff, and I picked up my drink, or what I thought was my drink,
Mhm.
and it was somebody's alcoholic drink.
Mhm.
And I had a drink and I was like, "No, not
Whoop,
mine. Whoop."
whoa.
And Alex was standing there and the look of horror on his face because
Ah.
he thought that this physical like, he thought that if I was to take this one sip of
Mhm.
alcohol, all of a sudden everything that I did was
Yep.
undone. And so, anyhow, my family was trying to put some sort of physical dependency on the alcohol.
Mhm.
as the reason. They were all looking for reasons, and understandably so, and so I
Mhm.
don't think that there is the full understanding of the mental part of this,
Yes.
because that is the side of addiction. It's the
Yeah.
mental part. This person has been so wounded and they don't know what else to do. I
Mhm.
mean, it's really it's quite interesting.
Yeah, thanks for reframing that because I think that's where things had shifted for me, especially at this point in time. Like, my capability to honor myself in the fact that I knew I had the strength to do Dry January finally was because I came to understand that misconception that I had about it being a genetic predisposition. Yes, that's in there, but experience with trauma, your capability to handle stress,
Yeah,
and all of these other, like, the mental aspects of being a human, those are all factors too, and so learning that, yes, I might have it might be genetically predisposed for me to be more likely to have addictive traits. That doesn't mean that I'm helpless, and it doesn't mean that that's going to be my story.
right.
It means that I might have to work a little bit differently than other people to combat against it, but also that I have the capability and the power to end that that storyline for myself if that's what I want to be doing. When did alcohol become a part of your life? Where were you? What were you doing?
Uh, I was in my 30s, and it was when I was always known as the person who would buy a six pack and drink like the neck out of a bottle and then never touch it. Like, I would be teased about it. Like, why do you even bother? And it's like, one of these days I'm going to find something that I like.
Yeah.
And then I found wine and I said, okay, I can actually drink this.
Mhm.
It impacted me and it gave me a sense of calm that I hadn't experienced. It's a different kind of buzz, as for anybody who drinks. And then all of a sudden, I was able to hang out at the party and not get harassed about not drinking.
Mhm.
And so it felt, it was good. Like, I was glad. I was happy that I was able to find something that, was able to kind of give me that disconnect from reality, because in
Mhm.
the beginning, it was just like, "Oh, this is new and this is fun, and I don't have to think about all my problems when I'm feeling like this. I can just go
Yeah.
dance and have fun and talk with my friends and laugh and just feel like just everything is great." That was in my 30s, and that's where it all kind of started. And then I think, at that point, I was going through, challenges in my own life as far as my marriage wasn't healthy. It was becoming evident that as we all age and grow and decide that maybe what we wanted when we were 20 and 21 years old is a little different. And I always had a really hard time sharing how I felt.
Mhm.
And when I started drinking, it became a little easier to share how I felt.
Mhm.
And so the wine in my 30s, as I started drinking, it gave me a courage that I couldn't find on my own,
Mhm.
and I falsely equated my own courage, which truly lived within me, I just hadn't found my voice yet, but I falsely equated that the only way to find that was through the bottle. It allowed me, to say the things that I needed to say that I never could find the words to say,
It removed your barriers to vulnerability.
100%. And so
Interesting.
then once I started that ride, if you will, because I started saying the things that I hadn't said for a very long time, and it was coming out with such strong emotion, it was coming out with such strength, and it was also something where it was like, because of my false equivalency to,
Yeah.
"This is how I found my power," it was just me, balls to the wall, "Okay, don't even look in the rear view, I am going this way." I found my voice, and I started to invite it more and more into my life and into my social circles, into just anything,
Mhm.
and it that's kind of where it was introduced, and that's when I started to figure out how to use it.
Mhm. I was much younger.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went to a university for 2 years right after I graduated. figured out it wasn't quite for me, transferred to MSU. My transfer to MSU was kind of like ripping the childhood Band-Aid off.
Tell me more.
It was this moment in my life, and I look back at this now and I'm fucking ding dong, but I thought I had it all figured out. You know, this is what I'm doing, and I'm an adult, and I have control of my life, and adults drink alcohol. All the adults around me at that point in my life, all the friends that I had at that point in my life,
Sure.
we're all consuming alcohol together. What the version of Jill that that brought out was bubbly. She was funny. She was spicy. She was interesting. She was dancing. She was making friends. She did not have a care in the world. And then the that just like you're saying, like, that became I loved that version of
Yeah.
me so much and what didn't know that I already am that person that's easily integrated, but had just been so I had so much determination in my early 20s and, like, very naive, but a very clear vision for who I wanted to be and what I wanted to be involved in. But and that wound me so tight in those aspirations. I was very aspirational young woman, like, loved being in leadership, loved being involved in communities. Every place I've lived, I've gotten heavily involved in volunteering, like, that that aspect of me was a very uptight person and didn't really understand that if you squeeze something so tight, it's gonna pop.
Yeah.
And, going out with my friends, going out I also worked pretty much full time while I was putting myself through college, going out with the people that I worked with, my Apple buddies, that was what I thought what everybody else was doing all the time. I thought everybody else was at the bar 4 or 5 days a week. I thought that's how everybody else was getting through school. My grades were decent enough. I was getting to classes. I was getting the things done that I knew I needed to get done. And so this was alcohol being around me was just another facet and an exciting facet and, like a little sexy, a little fun, and like let's unwind or
Yep.
decompress from our stressful day. And that's kind of where it was introduced into my life was when I was at MSU. And I also look back at that time and I understand I wasn't set up to manage stress well. I had not put together a toolkit for myself.
Yeah, underdeveloped coping skills.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
100%.
Yeah.
And my bullheadedness, because I'm stubborn as fuck. I don't know if you know this about me.
I've seen a few things that gave me that indication, but I
Yeah,
haven't seen it
yeah.
in an ugly form.
I'm stubborn as hell, and it's in a way that is like, "All right, you're gonna fuck around and find out." And that has kind of like that have been my brand of humaning is that I have to learn a lot of things the hard way, and being at MSU is, like, kind of my first step into not understanding how to actually human in a healthy way. It was how I figured out a lot of bad ways to human and to cope with the rigors of life. Do you have a moment in time
Mhm.
that you can put a pin in and say, "This is the breaking point. This was the point in which I realized this has turned to not so great." And rock bottom, what does that look like for you?
Mhm.
How many times have you been there? And you don't have to get super into details if you don't want to, 100% your choice. Obviously, we know that.
Yeah.
What's the underbelly part of the journey for you?
I'm a very good, storyteller, and I like telling myself stories a lot, and so I did that for a very long time and
I
convinced myself.
do love that, like, your number one storytelling client is yourself,
Uh-huh.
and people forget that.
100%. And so, I was drinking it was quite a bit, and it had turned into starting to drink alone at home, and I still was telling myself people did that. The place that I was working at that time, we had a very close group of friends. I was going through a divorce at that time, and so it was hard to, go home, and so we ended up going out after work quite a bit. And again, I'm seeing all of these people with families and this and that, and everybody's doing the same thing I'm doing, so I'm fine, right? Well, what they probably weren't doing is going home and continuing to drink and
Yeah.
doing all of those things and such. And so, but I still was justifying. And then I started seeing it show up in ways where it was impacting my job,
Mm.
and I was isolating a lot
Mhm.
more, and I think started pinging for me on the inside that there might be a problem.
Mhm.
But I was terrified to let it go
Mm.
because it was the thing that I had still convinced myself got me through the divorce. I'd convinced myself that I had to stay angry to get through some of the things that I was getting through, because if I allowed myself to not be angry and feel the sadness, I would walk back what I was trying to do, and I knew that was the wrong thing. So anger was the
Mhm.
only thing that would help me keep putting one foot in front of the other, and in order to stay angry, I had to tap into those emotions that my sober self would convince myself I wasn't justified in being quite so angry about, but my drinking self was like, "Fuck that, you are. Yeah, absolutely, you should be angry about that, and where is that person? Because 'Cause you're gonna go tell them just how angry you are right now." So, those types of things were still rolling in my head because it's like I still was convinced that I couldn't do it without the alcohol, but I also knew that I was starting to hurt people that I cared about. And I also knew that it was starting to show up in ways that was embarrassing and causing me regret in the morning and those types of things. So that's the isolation happened. And then I think the big turning point was I knew people were seeing it, my family, my friends, but I'm not an easy person to approach, with those types of things, especially back then because I didn't wanna hear the truth from
You
anybody
mean
else
with, like, inquiries about how you're doing or, like, your emotional status or,
or raising any concerns about my drinking,
like,
if
you return very defensive?
yeah,
Okay.
I would absolutely make it really hard for people to bring that up, even though I knew, but it was
Mhm.
classic, So, what ended up being the thing that made me get my shit together was my son, was Alex. There was one day in particular that he came home from school, and I was hammered at that point. And he walked in, and this would have been 2020, so he would have been 15 at that time. And he walked in, and, the one thing about me drinking, I don't think that I was ever, like, super mean. Like, I had my moments and stuff, but it was just you couldn't talk to me. Like, I just had so much inside that I didn't know how to get through to be able to talk. Like, it was just nobody could touch me, nobody could help me, and it got to a point where it was just too hard to look at and too hard to watch me destroy myself. And I didn't realize that that's what the world was seeing. I didn't realize that that's what Alex was seeing until that day. I think it was March 4th, but I was really drunk.
We're, like
Yeah, yeah, very
we're
close.
on the heels.
6 years
Well,
almost.
not on the heels, we're on the toes of it.
Yeah, 6 years.
Holy biscuits.
But
You wanna talk about timely.
it was right before COVID. So COVID was just starting to be a thing, and Alex comes home from school and sees me kind of drunk again and was just like, "Mom, I love you, but I can't do this. Like, I'm going to dad's,"
Mm.
and he ended up leaving. And that was, like I said, it was right after school, so it would have been like 3:30 in the afternoon, something like that. So he walked out, and I started crying and realizing, there was no running away from that. There was no story I could tell myself that made that okay. And I decided that I knew myself well enough to know that I needed a full stop, that I was not going to be able to just practice changing some behaviors in my day to day because I had allowed it to be every part of my day to day, and so it was just too much, and so I knew I had to do, like, a full stop, and I needed to go away to do that, and so I started calling places, and the first place I called was in Harrison, and I decided that I would go and check in that night into a treatment facility. In my mind, I didn't think that I would be gone for more than a couple days. Only packed a couple pair of underwear, just I was super drunk at this point, but I knew that I needed to do something, and I knew that I had to go away to do it, and I knew that that was the day that it needed to happen, otherwise, I would probably die. I knew it was getting close to as much as I was drinking that it would probably end up being what killed me. And so I went. Sunny actually drove me down, and it was about 9 o'clock that night. I was checked in to a treatment facility that was for, business professionals.
Interesting.
Yeah, really interesting, quite
That's
honestly,
interesting.
and that was the best thing that I could have done for myself because it completely blew apart my vision of what an alcoholic was, because these are people that were just like me. These were men and women who were professionals, there were CEOs, there were people, and these were people from all over the country, and and I it took me a couple of days of sobering up and kind of sitting in the dark corner with my hood over my face in the group therapy sessions and
Mhm.
in just listening that I started to realize, and I started to hear that same damn story I was telling myself was the same story that everybody told themselves. And when I started realizing we're all just we have underdeveloped coping skills, and
Mhm.
alcohol was the only damn thing that any of us could find that allowed us to get through the day. I was able to flip it in my mind from something that it was the thing that gave me the strength to say the things that I needed to, "Oh, I see. I've always had that. I just didn't know how to tap into it on my own without that extra push from the alcohol." And really, all of this is just rooted in some feelings that I have not processed and have never processed. And it just all of a sudden flipped from this completely uncontrollable monster in my life to being, I mean, and it was still big. I don't want to underplay it, but it all of a sudden flipped from the monster that I couldn't see the face of
Mhm.
to you're just the little girl that I've ignored for
Mhm.
years and years and years. You're not
Mhm.
scary. I
Uh-huh.
just need to come give you a big giant hug and sit with you for a while. And when I was able to kind of flip that for myself and be able to start opening up in those sessions and be able to talk about kind of some of the things that I had gone through, it just tapped into okay, I hit rock bottom, if you will, but rock bottom was just simply I hit the place where I was able to find the clarity that I needed to figure out where the path was.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, from there, I mean, thankfully, I've never been tempted to pick up alcohol from then. It was a really interesting situation because, like I said, it was right at COVID. So I actually look at that as a positive thing for me because my entire circle of friends, my entire existence, everything that I knew was wrapped up in going out to the bars and going out and doing this and going out and doing
Yeah,
that.
you ain't going
I
nowhere.
know, and if I think about it, like, when I came home from treatment because I was supposed to be there for 28 days, again, I thought I was going for 2 or 3, but then they were like, "Your insurance won't pay for it if you leave early," which I still don't know if that's, like, a ploy, but either way, brilliant because it got me to stay. But they ended up closing it early because the world shut down. So I was there for I think it was 23 days, I was there, and then when I came home, it wasn't even a possibility to see people, it was quarantine already,
Yeah, that was, like, high
was
alert time.
yeah, like,
Like,
everything
don't
was
even
shut
leave your
down.
house.
Yes, and
Yeah,
so it was me, it was Sunny, and it was Alex sitting in the house, and I was able to reconnect with myself, in a way that I think has led to some of the success that I've seen in sobriety, so that was the turning point.
that's interesting.
What
I
about
th
you?
yeah, well, I don't have it,
Well, what made you start Dry January too? Like,
well,
there's decisions, like
let's go back.
yeah.
Let's take it back because there have been some low points so far in my journey. I initially think of in my early 20s, so I probably was 23 at this point. The same story, had gotten similar story, I guess, but much younger. Had gotten to the point where I was in a rhythm that was unsustainable, and I realized it. Um, so paint the scene is that I'm 23. I think I was 23. Well, it's about 9:30 in the morning, sitting in the rental that I lived in with a couple of girlfriends, and hungover as hell, just miserable. And this was probably the ninth or 10th day that it was the same scene.
Mm,
I had to get into work. I was bartending at that point in my life, which also was not helpful
mhm.
I was probably, like, either opening bartender or, like, opening server, closing bartender. I was working my ass off, and then knew that as soon as it wasn't even a question, it was an expectation that after our shifts, me and my work buddies would go to the bar down the
Sure.
street.
Yep.
Expectation, and if you weren't there, you got shit for it. So I was always there, and, 9th, 10th day of this hangover, get over the hangover, get to work, do your things, go back to the bar, and subject yourself to that same kind of misery. I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I had drank all my money away from that summer,
Yeah.
which was supposed to be paying for my college education, my bills and shit. I'm living alone in East Lansing. My family's 2.5 hours away,
Mhm.
right? I don't have a safety net. And so I called my parents. And I recognize the same thing that you recognized, is that in order to get myself out of that mill of wash, rinse, repeat,
Yeah.
and I swear to God, and I love this is part of the reason I love my mother for this. Um, Called them, which was rare. I don't call my parents often. Sorry.
They're listening. Hell
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, but called my mom's cell phone. And she picked up the phone and she said, "Oh, hello." In the way I said hi, she knew something
Wow.
was wrong. Like, her mom instinct just, like, right
Ping.
into play, and she just said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I need you to come get me." And she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I'm safe. I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm functioning." It's kind of a long story, but, like, I can't stop drinking. Like, I can't say no to this pressure that I'm feeling, and I need to leave.
Yeah.
Those individuals, those amazing motherfuckers, beelined from Monroe, Michigan, up to East Lansing, bags, boxes, packed me up, and took me immediately. Like, no questions asked. It wasn't even like they were concerned, they were not mad.
Yeah.
Which was really helpful in my, like, healing process from that, and just said, like, "Okay, like, you're coming home and we'll figure the rest of it out later," and did give me, like, a soft place to land. Um, and I didn't after that experience, I didn't drink for quite a while. Practiced sobriety, uh, tried a couple of AA meetings, was way too emotional. Too emotionally raw to actually, like, feel like that was a place for me to be and to find solace. It didn't make sense to me. I don't know why I went there. It was very gross, actually, now that I
Yeah.
look back at it, I'm like, it gross like, I was gross for trying to interject myself into a place like that because I it just didn't fit me and what I was thought I was dealing with. Eventually, alcohol slowly crept its way back in, and I thought I had a hold on it. My first husband and I, we would have drinks every once in a while. Yeah, like, it was like a weekly thing. We did like to drink together, but we would never be drunk.
Yeah.
We just like to drink 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 beers or drinks. We wouldn't be out much. We're young parents, and that was pretty much it. My life started to get pretty stressful when we had our kids, right? So that increased my frequency of drinking or my turn to the bottle. Whenever I could find a gap of time where I didn't have to be with children, I was grabbing a drink.
Yep.
I was grabbing a lot of drinks.
Yep.
And then, like, same thing, like, going out with girlfriends. I was teaching at a dance studio. That was a very stressful and traumatizing situation for us.
Mhm.
And we bonded over getting drinks after teaching. My kids are in bed, so I'm gonna go out and party a little bit and then but then my brother died. That really was, like, n absolutely no skills whatsoever to process anything anymore. Like, that was a huge stressor, and I was putting away at least a bottle of wine a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, easily. And I do recall one day, there's a period of time after my brother died, before my first husband and I split up. that we were still making things work, but he said to me, "Do you think you've had enough today?" When I think I was, like, opening a second bottle of wine and hadn't even thought of it, like, hadn't even thought to myself, "How many of these are you going to drink?" It was just that I needed a drink
Mhm.
and needed to have the safety of the drink with me. And that was definitely, like, the time in my life where I was using it to numb myself because everything happening was just too overwhelming. And so that alcohol was, like, trying to take things down a notch. So that's kind of like that's a marker in time. Would love to say that changed how I consumed alcohol, it didn't. That rate it calmed down a little bit, but that persisted for many years, was that it was probably 3, 4, 5 drinks, 3, 4, 5 days a week. And then I realized at one point it was pretty much every day and drinking every day
Yeah.
and was putting down, those giant bottles of rum in a pace that would kill a man.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Just and and just not being aware of how frequent and how intensely and, like, you go to the doctor and they're like, "How much do you drink?" And I'm like, "Yeah, 1 or 2 a night."
Right?
And, like, yeah, it might be 1 or 2 glasses, but I'm making a mixed cocktail, and what's my ratio?
Mhm.
80 and it's not of my mixer, that's 80%,
Yep.
like, real strong, and just all that stuff. Toby shows up in my life. Toby's not much of a drinker, right? That's my boyfriend for people who don't know. He's not much of a drinker. I'm a tumultuous person, I'm still drinking. A little bit of, like, sheer independence has been woven in there because I've been a single lady for so long. So, like, similar to what you were saying about, like, you can't tell me nothing. It was like, you don't know what I've lived through kind of thing, like badge of honor. You don't know I've lived through,
Right.
I've earned these 5 drinks
Mhm.
at dinner kind of thing.
Mhm.
Just being around him and seeing that there is an option to be a high functioning positive human that doesn't have this vice. Never saw that so closely or was able to observe it in a way that wasn't like, "Oh, you should be doing it this way." He was just who he is, and, he's like I said, he's in the recovery community. He talks about his work, he talks about the research. And I also think part of what has shifted in my life is that before Toby and I moved in together, my level of stress was astronomical. Not solely through like work is stressful, being a mom is stressful, doing the things I do are stressful. I was barely scraping, like I'm rubbing pennies together kind of stress that is like, so when you're in socioeconomic stress, that moves your baseline stress level up. And I just didn't realize that. Like, I didn't realize until I got a new job, and that lowered my baseline stress level. And then I was drinking less. And then I moved in with Toby, and now we have a dual income house. And that significantly dropped my stress level, which dropped my drive to drink. And so then, if you would have asked me a year ago, and this was before I moved in with Toby, if I would do dry January next year, I would have laughed in your face.
Yeah.
Partially because that is my defense mechanism. Like, yeah, you're nuts. But because I knew that at that point in time, I didn't have the strength and I don't like to do things that I'm not good at. Right. So I knew I was going to fail because I was too strongly driven to be drunk that I would fail that. And so I'm not even going to try. But so we got through, we moved in together. We got through the summer. It was wonderful. Rolled up into the fall. I love Thanksgiving and I love Christmas and knew that we were going to have so much happening in our house.
Mhm.
It was wonderful and stressful in its own delightful way. But like each month, it seemed like my, a couple of things happened. My drive to drink lowered. My tolerance for alcohol shifted wildly. Probably in August, maybe September, I started a medication that now I think really impacts how alcohol is processed in your body. Because I would have 1 drink, maybe a small glass of wine, and feel like I had a hangover the next day.
Mm.
So huge shift in my tolerance. And I just didn't like it wasn't worth it at that point to be imbibing all the time. And then we got through the holidays and like we're hardly drinking. And I was like, I'm gonna try dry January because now I think I have realize that it's stress driven for me. My stress level is much lower and more in a manageable way. You know, when you're trying to figure out how to pay 3 months worth of bills when you only have 2 weeks worth of cash,
Right.
it's a different level of
Yeah.
stress than, "Oh, I have this presentation to do." You know, like the monsters become different. It's not so menacing and I can challenge it back. And so going through dry January and now it opened my eyes to my own power in the fact that I am capable of doing hard things and tackling this life that I've built for myself, and that alcohol doesn't it can be part of the celebrations and like, the fun parts are, like, it can be more intentionally consumed. Because I know better that I can handle the stress and also if it gets too stressful, how to manage my stress. So, I yeah, and I had drinks last night with girlfriends. I feel fine this morning, I'm not on that medication anymore, which in the past, I wouldn't have even started that medication if I would have known that it had a weird interaction with alcohol and my tolerance.
Mhm.
But the life shift has really just opened my eyes to this whole different way of operating. And now it's not it used to be a constant worry, like, a giant bottle of rum was always on my grocery list, and I sometimes would pick and choose other groceries around to make sure that I could
Yep.
afford that bottle of rum.
Yep.
And I don't even go into like, I hardly ever buy alcohol for myself. Last night, I was putting together weird ass cocktails because, like, I had vodka here and a diet 7 Up Shirley Temple there, and I'm like, "Ugh," but, like, okay, we'll try that, and it's not this priority anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that proving to myself that I could do the dry January was a really powerful moment for me as I'm turning 40 within I think it's like 2 weeks away. Yeah, it's like 2.5 weeks away. And so to look at this next decade of my life and
Mhm.
to feel like I don't think I have all the answers yet about my relationship with alcohol, but I feel a lot more empowered, in myself and to can trust myself more when it comes to my decisions and what I'm gonna be doing and how alcohol will be involved in that storyline. And it doesn't feel like it's such a important character anymore that wreaks havoc.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
That's lovely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, because I mean, it's profound when you can get yourself kind of when you can deconstruct the power that it has over your day to day, and when you can, when you really can reconcile and see that is that underdeveloped coping skill, and when your
Mhm.
stress can lower in a way, all of that is because of your current life situation, that
Yes.
you've been able to have that clarity because your stress levels have lowered in a way that it's been able to allow that clarity to come. You're able to manage differently and better. It's all, yeah, just
Well,
all sorts
and,
of fun.
like, to note on that, like, as you're even saying that and as I have been thinking about this process is that it, again, feels very much like I feel very privileged to have been able to figure this out. Thinking about myself in my late 30s who was single momming, living alone, there are so many of those versions of Jill that are around the world. And knowing that I really was, I was one bad move away from
Yeah.
my life being upended
Yeah.
because of my intense relationship with alcohol. And thank God the universe, whatever I want to call it, somehow, God, now I feel like I want to knock on wood. Somehow I never experienced a really significant consequence. And there are times and situations where I very much should have.
Yeah.
I should have, had the rug pulled out from underneath me with the law.
Yeah.
And just never was always like sneaky enough to get away with it. Maybe that's another thing for me to examine is like, you know, there's manipulation in there on
Mhm,
my part.
mhm.
There's luck. Why do I have good luck in that way? I'm not really sure, but I feel a lot of privilege at this point in my life to be able to give myself the grace and to give myself the space to reinvent myself almost. So that's wonderful.
It's important. I'm glad that you had that opportunity to put yourself through that kind of experiment, if you will, because there is, again, there is so much power that comes out of realizing that you can make it through
Mhm.
those days. You can make it through. You can cope. You can get through. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's not as fun. I'm not going to lie. You don't
Yeah.
have your high highs. That's one thing that I had to kind of come to terms with is there were so many times, like some of the best memories that I have in my life, there was alcohol involved and it was with friends or with family or it was a celebration and it was always kind of rooted in that. And I remember kind of after I got sober realizing I don't know that I'm gonna feel those super big highs anymore because part of the alcohol and lowering that inhibition and stuff is what allowed that extreme emotion to come through. But on the flip side of that coin, I also don't have those extreme lows anymore
Mhm.
either that come also as a result of drinking. So it's like when I realized that, where my power came to be out of being sober and not numbing myself in that way is I was able to then kind of elevate life in a way where it's like it all kind of was able to raise to a
Mhm.
certain level where it's like, yes, it might be even. I might not have those
A
peaks and
swing.
valleys, those swings that, sometimes I loved. Like I am an energetic, social
Mhm.
kind of I love people's energy, and when
Mhm.
it's high, I'm right there in it, and sometimes when even now, when I'm around people who are drinking and they're having those moments and stuff, it's great, but I am disconnected from that. Like,
Mhm.
I am not part of that anymore, and that's okay,
Mhm.
and it took me a while to get to the point where it's like, that's okay, but that's when I realized that I was gonna have to part of this journey was going to be, I had to redefine who was in my life because
Mhm.
friends started falling away and people started to, again, they were uncomfortable. I could feel it being around me because whether it was they were feeling judged by me and I never wanted to make people feel that way, but that was part of the learning that I had to go through where it was like I'm really really grateful for all of it, but I also had to reconcile that, oh, okay.
Mm.
There's some bigger changes that are going to have to happen as a result of that too.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think one of the things that we had talked about before is, it will be interesting to open these conversations, but then invite other voices in.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I know there are other people that were curious to hear their own experiences with alcohol
Mhm.
and stuff. And I think, you know, what I've observed in my own as I'm coming up on 6 years, again, I've seen and I've observed a big swing out there in kind of the support for non-drinkers,
Mhm.
whether it's going out and having non-alcoholic options on the menu,
Mhm.
those types of things and such. And so I think us talking about this, I think it's top of mind for a lot of people. Coming out of dry January, there were a lot of people who participated in that. And I think just the whole concept of how we use alcohol and you can add drugs and all of that too is just it's interesting. And so I don't want this to be it's certainly not the end of the conversation. I think we
Absolutely
can
not.
this will probably be a throughput through many of our conversations. But I think for now just kind of like yeah, that was what led up to the big aha moments with
Mhm.
how we kind of reconciled and stepped up to our own behaviors, and I think it's okay to kind of leave it there for now, but I also think that there is another conversation to be had about living in sobriety and such that I would love to share about kind of how
Yeah.
I show up because it impacts everything, but there's been so many learnings that I've had that
Yeah.
and so many opportunities that have come as a result of my sobriety.
Mhm.
Opportunities and ways that my life has improved and grown that would not have happened otherwise. And so I think exploring those and just kind of pulling the curtain back and then again, inviting other people into the conversation would be
Yeah,
interesting.
I definitely think to end on that note is that we are curious. We don't want to be the only voices, yelling into the vacuum of, our life. This is other people's life experience too. So we want to be in connection and hear from other people and what their journey's been like. We definitely, like you're saying, want to invite other voices to contribute to the conversation.
How do they reach out?
I think commenting on our videos,
Okay.
they can comment on where our podcast is posted on Spotify and on iTunes in the comment sections. But really, the best way to connect with us, you can connect directly on our social media platforms, which is the Human Development Collective, either on Facebook or on Instagram, or they can email either of us if you're willing to have your inbox flooded with all of our listeners. I think for now, if people are really feeling motivated to get directly in touch with us, they can email us directly. So
Okay.
my email address is Jillian, Jillian, at thehumandevelopmentcollective.org. And Rachel's is her first name, Rachel at the human.
EL. The only way Rachel should be spelled,
I never thought that it could
Rachel.
be spelled any other way.
Oh my gosh, it's a thing amongst us Rachels. We're like, "I'm an EL."
Really?
"Are you?"
What's the
Yeah.
other option?
AEL?
Ooh,
Weirdos. You're weirdos.
with love, but somebody
With
made
love,
weird
yeah.
choices.
Ah,
I've never seen or heard of a Rachel in any other way. So that's my
y'all, I'm
perplexity.
not even kidding. If you're a Rachel, post a comment too. Make them believe that I'm not crazy because it's a thing. Rachel Wilson, I
That's
know.
it. Oh,
Yeah.
do we know a Rachel that is a AEL
I do, but no, Rachel Wilson is one of
and
the cool
EL?
ones, which is an
Okay.
EL. Yeah.
I my first assumption was a YL,
Oh, see, that's
right?
that's
And I was
weird.
like, "That's really weird," but
Yeah.
AEL is even weirder. Anywho,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, let's
But
hear from the
anyways,
Rachels and let's
Rachel at thehumandevelopmentcollective.org or Jillian.
yeah, and so let's hear from the Rachels and the Jills of the world, but we are curious about other people's journey with alcohol and their relationship with alcohol and what it looks like in their life.
Yes.
I think with that, do we wanna talk about what we're gonna do we know what we're doing next week? We don't.
No, I
We have
think we
some
can tease a
ideas.
couple of
Yeah, we
things,
have
like
some ideas.
yeah, I mean, one of the things that HTC has been up to that I think we talked about in the first episode is our Women's Empowerment Summit, and so we just finished that up, and so that's definitely interesting for me to get those women in the room and have
Mhm.
us all have a conversation, and so I think that's something that we'll wanna do in the next couple of weeks, but I'd also be curious if other people have ideas of things that they want us to talk about or open and, explore, so one of the things that we're really excited about and we're exploring is kind of a storyteller's night. It's also another one of those frameworks that we're trying to set up that
Mhm.
allow just kind of a space for people to come in who have stories to share, who have some sort of experience that they went through that they think is important to share. It's another opportunity for us to create a moment where community can come together. We can learn from one another, and we'll share more about that. But I'm really, really
Yeah,
excited about
really
that.
excited.
So,
Excited to build a new marketing kit.
yay! So, but no, other than that, we are recorded. Our 2.1.
So 2.1, thanks
Yeah.
for listening. We'll
Thanks, everybody.
see you on the other flip. That doesn't work. I don't
No,
know.
we're gonna find
We'll
something
see you in
though.
the buffet line? No.
No.
Well, I mean, on the other side is the other side of the pancake, but
Right.
are we the pancake
See you on the flip
or is
side.
the I don't know. We'll
We'll work
workshop
on
it.
it. All
Okay,
right.
bye.
That's amazing.